We're just giving people a few, like another minute or two to get logged in, and then we'll get started. Thank you all for coming. Michael, can you hear the heater in my microphone? Okay, good. Sorry, other Michael, if you thought I was singling you out. I was talking to Michael Decker. All right, we're gonna do one more minute to give a few more people a chance to log in. We'll get started right around 10:01. And depending on questions, this may not go all the way to 11. So we'll take as much time as folks need. Okay. Right. Sorry, I was just waiting. We got more people joining us. Okay. I think we have probably most folks who are going to come are here. So I want to welcome everyone. This is one of our super important programs to give you some helpful information. And before I start sharing my screen, I wanted to introduce our COGS folks that, I mean, they don't have to say anything, don't stress out. But let everyone know who is in the room so you know who some of your resources are. It's always nice to put faces to names. So Michael Decker is the Director of Grad Student Support Programming. I am the Graduate Assistant for Grad Student Support Programming. We have Jan in the main COGS office who handles a lot of the forms that we're going to talk about today. We also have Stephanie who is in the main COGS office. She's the assistant to Dean Jerry McMurtry, the Dean of COGS. And I think we might have Brittany who's coming today. I don't think she's here quite yet. But Brittany she handles study plans and things like that. So I just, before I shared, wanted to give you a chance to see their faces a little easier. And now I'll pull up the beginning of our presentation. And hopefully technology is going to cooperate with me today. I've got quite a few things to share. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get every window closed that isn't the things. I thought I had already done that, but apparently not. Okay. Um, Sorry about that. Let me open one more thing. Sorry. Okay. So we are not at the beginning of the slideshow. I was practicing, so there was a little preview. Okay. Welcome again. I want to give you a little overview of what we're going to talk about today and why we're talking about it. So I have a little background on me so you know who is talking to you today. I am a doctoral student in the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences. My department is movement sciences. I have completed a master's degree at U of I in fall of 2020, and then I am all but dissertation in my doctoral program. And so I've gone through many of these degree steps. And this presentation is one that didn't exist when I started in the assistantship position in 2020. And so working with two directors of grad student support programming ago, I created this workshop and we've amended it and worked on it to improve it. The things that'll be covered today are the most important steps that are kind of outside of your coursework. COGS has required forms, there are required steps that need to be accomplished, and there are so many resources available for you. And so the purpose today is to draw your attention to these resources, help you to know what's out there, how to find them, and give you an idea of what is coming next, what you maybe need to catch up on, and that kind of thing. So there's a few things I want to say, kind of housekeeping. If you've got questions, Michael's going to be looking at the chat. Jan and other COG staff can also be looking at the chat if you're able to. Um, so feel free to put questions in if they are going to be answered during the presentation. We probably won't interrupt it, but we will definitely have time for questions at the end. So if you have questions that aren't answered within the presentation, we'll do that. And then also Jan or Michael, if there are things, or Stephanie, or if Brittany shows up, if there are things I don't cover about a particular step, please feel free to unmute and interrupt. That will be just fine. So, all right. What I'd like everyone to think about as we are preparing, as we're going through this presentation, is there are many steps here. And I encourage you to just focus on, as it says, one step at a time. This workshop used to be two separate workshops. We did a doctoral workshop and a master's workshop, and then now we've combined them. So there are going to be a few steps that are track specific, whether you're in a master's program or a doctoral program. But we found that so many of them are shared between the types of degree programs. So another thing I want to make clear is that I will share these slides within the grad student support Canvas course. If you're, it's a resource course, and so many of these slides have clickable links, and I'm going to click on a lot of them to show you what they link to, give you an idea of all of the many resources that are hidden somewhere on the COGS website. They're actually pretty clear, but there's a lot of things on there. And so you'll be able to access those PDFs of the slides. If you're not in the Canvas course, and you should have received a link to it in your email at the beginning of the year or the semester. If you're not in it, feel free to send Michael an email or a message in the chat, and we can get you added to that course to make sure that you have access to not only all of these degree steps, but also recordings of a bunch of different workshops, all the ones we did in the fall. And then as we do them in the spring, we're posting them. There's also funding opportunities in there, the calendar of all of our workshops and professional development opportunities throughout the semester. So there's a lot of information in there that will be helpful as you go through your degree. I know it says it's a course, but there's no assignments, just resources. So I think that was where we needed to start out with, but I am going to click on these two steps to your degree guides. And these guides did exist in another form on the COGS website when I started, but I created new ones that had clickable links. And the only things currently that need to be updated, I believe, are it still says to complete things in VandalWeb, and as we know, we have switched from VandalWeb to MyUI, and so we're working on getting those forms updated. I will make sure to do that. And so this is again available on the slides, but what I would highly recommend doing, because even though I've worked in COGS for almost 5 years now, I still do this. If you're looking for something specific on the COGS website and you're having a hard time navigating it, I highly recommend just getting used to Googling UIdaho COGS and whatever it is that you're looking for. So UIdaho COGS steps to your degree, UIdaho COGS resources, all those kinds of things can be very helpful. Okay. Jan, are we back to the PowerPoint slide? Is that what we're seeing? Or Michael? We back? Okay, cool. Just making sure. And so that was the doctoral steps to your degree. There's also the master's steps to your degree that's a little bit different. And again, these links should work other than the VandalWeb. Okay. So moving on. The very first step that is extremely important for everyone as a graduate student is the appointment of your major professor and your committee. For each of these steps, we're going to talk about when to do them, if there's any required forms that need to be filled out, and then what resources we have available to help you to make some of these decisions. Now, choosing your major professor is one of the most important decisions that you'll make. And I want to say a few things about that. When I started as a master's student, I hadn't been in college for over a decade. And I remember just in one of my classes, my professor of that course said, "Do you all have major professors? Have you started your study plans?" And we kind of looked at her blankly because, again, there wasn't a workshop like this that went over the steps. And so I had no idea that I needed to do these COGS steps. And now, hopefully, we're communicating that a little more clearly. But that needs to happen within your first year for your master's degree, or by your third semester for your doctoral degree. But it's really important to think about someone. A lot of times, when a graduate student is admitted, they're admitted to work with a specific professor. And usually that has to do with their research track, but not always. And some degree programs are different in terms of you need to actively seek out a major professor to work with. And that has a lot to do with registration, and things like that. Now, also, your major professor may not always be the best fit throughout your entire program. Hopefully, they will be, but sometimes there are various reasons why that might not work out. My major professor, when I started my doctoral degree program, ended up not being the best person to support me in my program. And I got really good support for changing major professors to a different one, and that has been really helpful. So I want to talk about, and we'll talk about committees in a moment, but I want to show you the form. So we're going to click on this form. And this is a form that you must fill out as you are a graduate student. And it can be found again if you search on U Idaho COGS, or if you go to the forms on there. Major professor committee appointment or changes. So this is a form that you'll probably fill out multiple times throughout your program, unless you are a non-thesis master's student. I think that usually would be the only time you wouldn't, if your major professor is your full committee. But so for this form, you use this when you appoint your major professor, you use it when you appoint your committee, and you use it if you need to change those things. You also, well, another form that we don't really talk about in this presentation, I had meant to add it actually, is that if you go from being a thesis student to a non-thesis student, there's a form called the change of curriculum form that also is available on the COGS Forms website. And that will be really important if you decide to change your degree track. That was also something that I did when I was a master's student. I actually changed it twice, mostly because of COVID and my research site having to close down. Um, so yes, and so if you're removing your major professor or committee members, that also would be a time when you would need to do this. And so you need to make sure to get all these signatures. One thing I want to point out is that while I imagine some people do paper forms, most of the time these are going to be online forms that you get e-signatures for, and then you email to cogs-forms at UIdaho. So that's an important email address to keep in mind as you are getting these forms completed. And it does say it right up at the top of the form there, COGS-forms. You can also talk, and we'll mention this later, but where folks are located who handle the forms and study plans are in Morrill Hall, room 104. And they're very nice if you go in there and need help. Okay, when I go back to the slide, the resource that's mentioned is basically the second page of this form. And so it talks about the COG specific requirements for your major professor and committee, appointments or changes. And a lot of times folks want to have someone on their committee who's outside of the university. And so it talks about the specific needs for doing that. And again, these are the COGS requirements, so they're kind of the minimum. You may have different requirements from your department, additional ones. So that's something you'll really counsel with your major professor about as you're doing your committee appointment. Timing on your committee, again, is really that you'll want to consult with your major professor, but having that committee appointed needs to happen before your preliminary exam and advancement to candidacy, which we'll talk about in a moment. But so that's kind of the timing, but again, some folks create their committee early on. If you're a non-thesis master's, your committee may be your major professor. As a doctoral student, you'll need a doctoral committee. So those are the forms, resources, timing, and my comments. Okay. The next step, one of the most essential steps, is creating your study plan. Now, last Monday, we had an entire workshop on creating a study plan that Brittany did. Very helpful. We will post it's, the slides from the fall and the recording from the fall are currently available in Canvas. So if you want to get those immediately, you can. We'll also post this semester's recording and slides soon, probably within this week, so that you can see those, but the content should be almost identical. So that's a really good resource. We're not going to go into significant detail about the study plan, but I do want to give you some information about the importance of it and some timing. So where you find the study plan and degree audit is within my UI. And that's on that student profile card. There's the student profile. I think it's like self-service, and then you'll click on degree audit in your student profile. This is one that I can't show you super well because my Vandal number shows up and we don't want to record that. So you'll find it though in your student profile in degree audit in my UI. And when you're creating it, it's really essential that early on, right when you start, you're looking at your graduate handbook or doctoral handbook for your program. That's going to have your department specific requirements for completing your degree. And then also I'm going to click on instructions for creating a new plan, and there's also requirements and guidelines that COGS has that are really important to know about because you're going to need to have hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself. Timing wise, when you need to have your study plan in place, you must have it in place by the end of your first year for your master's or the end of your third semester for your doctoral degree. Now, don't panic if you're further along in the process than that and you haven't created your study plan. We know you're out there. You may not be in the room right now, but if you're watching and you're a little behind, it's all right, but get it as soon as possible. It is required that you have an approved study plan before you apply to graduate, so you're not getting out of here without a study plan. That's very important. Kind of the sooner the better for several reasons. When you create a study plan, it gets approved by various levels. Your department chair, first your major professor, then it goes through your college, and then it gets to the College of Graduate Studies. And by the time it is all approved, that sort of forms a contract with the university. And there are all sorts of things that can happen with your major professor, your committee. Faculty members move on. And if you have a study plan on file, that's sort of a contract saying, if you complete these things, we're going to give you a degree at the end. And so that kind of helps you when circumstances happen that are outside of your control. Again, we had a great detailed workshop on putting in transfer credits and timing wise. When I started, you needed to put it into a specific semester. You needed to complete it that semester, and that felt really complicated. It's not like that anymore, which is very helpful. And Brittany also talked about like the new 4-digit credit, or sorry, course descriptions. There are some things that are changing that can make it a little more complicated. She went into that in more detail. I can't go into detail on that. Um, so another reason to have your study plan in order early is that not all classes are offered every semester. So if you have courses that are required and you think you're done, but you didn't get your study plan in, you may find out when you think you're about to graduate, oh man, I did not complete a course and it's not available for this last semester. I have to take another year or another semester of course. And that can really mess you up. So the earlier you create a plan, the better. Now, you don't always know exactly what's going to be offered, when it's going to be offered, so the plan can be changed. It's not set in stone exactly, but as you take courses that are different, it's very important that you've got approval from your major professor that yes, this will count instead. And then depending on, again, talking with your major professor, which is something I will say all the time, because they're supposed to be your mentor in all of these steps. They're supposed to be helping you to know what to take and how to get all the coursework completed. But timing wise on resubmitting your study plan is going to be sort of up to you and your major professor. You don't need to do it every single semester, resubmit it to everyone. Another thing to note is that you should be getting emails each step of the way. As your study plan is submitted, as it's approved by the different levels, that's going to be communicated automatically to you. If you're not getting those emails, or if you look in your degree audit and you see that it's not approved, I forget the wording. I think it says not approved or pending or something. But if it says that, reach out to your major professor and ask them if they approved it because the first step is that they need to. And you can also always reach out to COGS, COGS-forms, or just COGS at UIdaho, and they can look it up and see exactly where it is in the chain of approvals. So another piece of advice is make sure when you are submitting your study plan that you have already worked through it with your major professor. It's just a waste of everyone's time if you just set it in there and then your major professor's like, no, this isn't going to work. So how I personally have done it, and a lot of people do, is that they look through the doctoral handbook, they look through the COGS requirements, and they create it in Excel, a spreadsheet, and then they send that to their major professor and say, okay, is this going to work? Do we need to change anything? Here's what I'm thinking. And then once they do that, then they put it into degree audit or into the study plan, creating a new plan. Okay, I said I was going to click on a couple of these things. So this is the instructions for a new plan. And this sort of walks you through the visuals of how to do it, which I think is a super helpful resource. And again, these are all on the COGS website, but once you get these slides, kind of nice to have them here. And then degree audit information. This is on the registrar's website, but it does talk about some of the steps in the process with some other instructional sheets there, and also information for faculty and advisors. And then also specifically, like again, this is something to look in your department's degree handbook, but COGS also has requirements. So for a doctoral degree, you need to have a minimum of 78 credits. Your department might need more or less than that, but you have to have for COGS 78 credits. And then there's requirements about which ones need to be 500 or above, how many research credits you can have. I know on my degree audit, I've got one research credit, or I think it's a 599, and I took it as 3 credits, and 2 of those counted, but because, anyway, you need to make sure that you're following the instructions, and not everything that you take might be necessary for your study plan. And so you put in your study plan all of the current and transfer credits that you need to graduate. I'll show the master's real quick. I don't know that there's any specific notes, but this might be the thing. 5 credits, of course, $5.99 here. I think I had 6 credits, and so that was still fine. And then, yeah, Michael or Jan, if there's questions in the chat, feel free. I just saw that there's something in the chat, but feel free to interrupt. Okay, so that was a lot of information about study plans. Very important when you're looking to graduate that you have that all in order. Very important to go through it early on with your major professor, and there's a lot of resources. Okay, unless anyone has anything to add, we're going to move on. Okay, so for doctoral students, the preliminary exam and advancement to candidacy, for me at least, and in my program, was one of the most mysterious things of all. And so the reason for that is because preliminary exams can look completely different across departments, across colleges. And so to get rid of the mystery, I recommend talking with your faculty member, your major professor, your committee right away as soon as possible, saying, what is my advancement to candidacy going to look like? What do I need to be preparing for? For me personally, my preliminary exam was a portfolio of presentations, publications, leadership roles at the university, things like that, which is very different than even other students working with my same major professor. So that blew my mind a little bit. This is not necessarily uniform across even departments. And so another reason, like being clear on what it'll be is important, but also you may need to be working towards it. If your preliminary exam is a publication, you can ask, can you give me an example of another publication? Can you give me an example of a portfolio like I had to do? Can I see some of the questions that were posed for students or the test or whatever it is that your preliminary exam is going to be? Your faculty member should be able to provide you with an example so that you can be preparing. Another thing that I've noticed is that for my courses, a lot of them, the titles of them were like A4, A5. I don't know what that means, but if as you're going through your program, there's things that are going to add to or help you prepare for your preliminary exam, like if you know what the test or whatever it is going to look like, you can start a folder in your computer or your OneDrive or whatever, and have those important things you've written for courses or studies you've done or whatever, put them together so they're in one place and it'll be easier to gather those when the time comes. So this, again, after your full committee has been appointed and the majority of courses on your study plan are complete. And again, that varies. For my particular faculty advisor, I had to have all of my courses except my 18 dissertation credits completed. I couldn't even register for dissertation credits until all my other coursework was done. So again, this is one of those. It's a little hard to do workshops like this because it's different across the departments. And so it's another time to talk with your major professor. There is a specific form that needs to be filled out, and your major professor and your committee certify that all the requirements have been met. So they need to fill out this form, but you need to give this form to them to fill out, and then electronically submit that to COGS, and then we will know that you have advanced to candidacy. And again, your major professor is your best resource. Okay, now we're moving on to writing your dissertation or thesis or preparing for your non-thesis project. In my master's, I was going to do a master's thesis, and then, like I said, for COVID, things needed to shift, and I switched to doing a report on an internship instead. And so it can take many forms, your culminating project. But if you're doing a thesis or a dissertation, I want to share with you the most important resource of all. So, and again, another plug, let me look at the calendar. Formatting your thesis or dissertation, just like we did with study plans, we're doing a whole workshop, like 45-minute workshop, on February 24th. Molly, who is our ETD, Electronic Thesis and Dissertation Advisor, she will give a full workshop on all the details of how to submit your dissertation, how to format your thesis, dissertation, all these things. But I'm going to give you a couple of tips to sort of get you started. So the dissertation and thesis handbook, I am going to, how do I get, let's see, just a minute. Okay. If I share this. Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. I had it open in Word because on, let's go back one more time to this. Right down here in this gray box, you've got all these guides and documents. So you've got the handbook as a PDF just to look at, and then the handbook as a Word document that you can use. We're going to look at that Word document briefly. Again, we've got a whole workshop on this. But this is a 30-page document that basically the purpose of it is that you write over it because it is all formatted in the way it needs to be. There are some very finicky things that are required for a dissertation or a thesis, such as your margins on the left side are different than your margins on the right side because it needs to be able to be bound. And just that little difference can make a huge have a huge impact on things like tables and figures and page breaks and things like that. So we highly recommend using this. I know there are some departments that use latex, and we don't currently have a template for that. We've worked towards getting someone to help us with that, but it hasn't happened yet. And so if your department requires or encourages that your thesis or dissertation is in that program, ask for an approved dissertation that you can write over, that you can use their document that was approved recently. That's important. It's recent. And that you can write over that. And so that is a tricky part. But if you are like many students who are using Word, this document has the formatting. Things like there's no page number on your first page, and then you've got lowercase Roman numerals for the first few pages, and then after the table of contents and lists of tables and figures, when you start chapter 1, you go to regular numbers, starting with 1. And doing that in itself can cause so many headaches in Word because Word is so stubborn. So just please look through this. And again, within the document, you've got all this information about margins and line spacing, fonts and text size, all of that. And so, but this is formatted using the headings and titles and figures, tables, things like that. And the cool thing is that these are all formatted so that if you just replace them, they will populate your table of contents, they'll populate your table of figures or that kind of thing. I see there's a lot of chats. Do we need to pause and answer any questions? Okay, we will keep going. So I just wanted to give a big shout out for this template that's been worked on by many people and updated each year. This one is December 2024. So we will move back into,
Molly's working on a new one.
oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay,
so it'll be perfect.
awesome. Thank you.
And there is a question in the chat about well-formatted equations using the dissertation template. Most of the time, you would probably want to use it as a figure if you don't want it to, if you don't want Word to change the little symbols and stuff. But Molly would have some good advice on that as well, and she has a another workshop on that. So
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Another one thing I will mention in here that comes up a lot is that you don't need to have a specific format like APA or MLA for your dissertation, but it does need to be consistent throughout. Some folks' dissertations involve multiple articles. If those are published, in journals that use different formats, you need to reformat one of them so that your entire dissertation is formatted consistently. Same with references. If you have multiple articles in there, you might have your references after each one, or you may have them at the end. Again, Molly is the expert who can clarify some of those specific questions for your unique situation. But those are things to be thinking about. So that's when, oh wait, did we go? We went forward. Sorry about that. Okay, sorry. When I closed it to look at the handbook, it went to a different page. All right, we are back. Okay. So, moving on to your application to graduate, there's a couple of things that have timelines, and your application to graduate is one of those. When you apply to graduate, which is on the student profile menu in MyUI, you need to make sure that you've gotten it approved by your major professor because it's going to go right to them. And if they are like, no, you're not ready to apply to graduate, then it's just not going to be approved. So again, talk with them about timing, but you want to apply one semester prior to the semester you'd like to graduate, ideally, not including summer. And you need to, when you apply to graduate, you need to be registered for a course. And I'm going to show the deadlines and then mention Grad 720. So the current deadlines, and this is from the registrar because we have in COGS, it talks about a lot of different things, applying to graduate, but also thesis and dissertation. So here we're just talking about how you can save money, which is if you apply before this certain date, it's only going to be $25 or $60 after. When you apply to graduate, just like with your study plan, it goes through several steps. Now, if you're not certain that you're going to graduate, like for me personally, I was hoping to graduate in May, and it's not quite going to happen. My dissertation is where I'm at, but I'm not going to be quite at that stage. And so I applied to graduate before the deadline and then realized actually I'm not going to be able to. So COGS holds on to your application to graduate. You're not charged until it goes to the registrar. So once COGS gets like certain, like, okay, they got these things done, then they send it to the registrar's office. But and the registrar honors when you submitted the application in MyUI or not. Yeah, in your student profile. So that's something to think about. And now I want to go back and mention what Grad 720 is. So as you are figuring out your timeline, if you have all of your coursework done and all you need to do is complete some of the, maybe you're just about done with your dissertation, all you really need to do is defend it, make any corrections, but that's really all you need to do. Coursework has to be done. You can register for Grad 720. Grad 720 is a zero credit course. It costs, at least in the fall, it costs $140. I don't know if that has changed. I think it's still 140.
it's close to 160 now.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So it went up a little bit, but
It's a
still
quarter of a cost of a credit. So
perfect. So this is 75% off of registering for like one research credit or one dissertation credit. So when you have all your credits already done, you can register for this zero credit, and that is because you need to be registered when you apply to graduate. So you can take it up to 2 times. You can't take it more than 2 times, but it's just for finishing status. It's getting you those last few things that sometimes take a little longer than you expect. And so I want to look at these other steps. Now, don't get super overwhelmed. This is a really helpful table, but it's also kind of overwhelming. So what I recommend you doing, this is kind of what I did, and now I need to edit it, but look on the left-hand column at when your target date is for graduation. Don't worry too much about the no registration dates. That's more of like you're in conversations with COGS and they say, okay, let's look at that date. We're going to focus on just fall, spring, summer, those dates. So say you want to graduate this coming summer of 2025. You need to apply to graduate by May 9th. You need to request to proceed by June 27th, and you need to have finished your defense and submit your draft to ETD July 11th. Everything needs to be approved by July 25th, and your final approval needs to be August 1st. That date of your degree would be August 1st. Um, so that's what I recommend is just zero in on that one row for now. And what I'd also encourage you to do is take 5 minutes or maybe a few more than five and put those dates into your phone calendar or whatever calendar you use and put reminders about 2 weeks before each one. And we're going to talk about some of these other steps, but I recommend doing that so that you can see, ooh, that is coming up. And am I ready to do that step? And if not, then you may need to reevaluate your graduation timeline. But I definitely recommend this page that has this. It's got these deadlines, but it also has, okay, what does it mean to apply to graduate? And also you've got this little diagram that has some questions to think about, the forms you need to fill out, and what each of the steps means. This is super helpful, and again, they've updated this over the years to make it super helpful. Okay.
Amanda, if I could say,
Oh,
each of
yes.
the items across the top of that chart, the 1 through 5, those are what are explained in that infograph and the what do you call it? The accordion thing
Yes.
above. So where it says apply to graduate, if you go to number 1 in the infograph or in the description, it corresponds with that. So those numbers correspond with the chart, just to let you know.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you've got step one down here, apply to graduate. You've got step one up here, apply to graduate. And then on this infographic, you've also got apply to graduate. So each of the numbers correspond. And so hopefully that gives you lots of details. And then we also have other guides for these degree steps. Thanks, Steph. Okay, so a table like this can look really overwhelming. I highly recommend just zoom in on the things that are specific to you. Okay, so you've applied to graduate. Now the next step is to request to proceed with your final defense of your thesis or dissertation. If you're a non-dissertation student, this will be completing your exit requirement. And so this needs to be, okay, some of these dates and deadlines can be a little fluid. This is not one of them. If you are a doctoral student specifically, you must file 2 weeks ahead of your scheduled defense. That's like a legal requirement for the college that it needs to be advertised to the public. That's just something that has to happen. For a master's defense, it needs to be submitted before your master's defense. Don't wait till 5 minutes before. You need to do it before, but it's not as critical to get it 2 weeks ahead. It's always helpful, so it can be so all the forms get to you and everything that needs to happen. But it is essential that this happens 2 weeks before for a doctoral defense. And then this form, request to proceed, again, needs to be, and think about this, how long it takes to get your signatures for these forms. Sometimes that can take a little while. This might be a little bit odd of a time to bring this up, but, well, actually, I'll bring it up the next. Yeah, no, we'll bring it up now. Anyway, when you're at the step of choosing your committee members, a lot of your faculty members have worked with folks on other committees, other dissertation or thesis committees. Sometimes people get a little bit of a reputation for being able to provide rapid feedback, or they may take a while to get back to you about a draft or about forms or about things like that. And it's kind of a little bit of a balancing act when you're choosing committee members, because if you're choosing folks who are an expert in the field or someone you think could be really valuable, but they really struggle to get you any feedback or to provide the value, that can add a lot of stress at the end of the process for you. So be asking your major professor, hey, have you worked with them on other committees? How prompt are they in their feedback, or how easy is it to schedule with them? It shouldn't probably be the first thing that you're wondering about someone. You want to get a good committee of good resources for you that balance each other out in their knowledge, but it is an important element of the process to be thinking about. Okay, we are almost out of, well, we got a few minutes left. Okay, so your final defense report and repository agreement or your non-thesis report. The repository agreement, that is a link that you can find on the COGS website and in this presentation. But your final defense report, that needs to be brought either in person or on Zoom to your final defense. And then it needs to be submitted within a week of your defense, within 7 days. The final defense report is going to be sent to you by COGS. So if you haven't received that, that means they haven't received your request to proceed form, which is very important. So you can't go find the final defense report. That gets sent to you again by COGS. And then your non-thesis report is submitted by your major professor. You don't submit that. So another little personal story, I was a non-thesis master's student, and I didn't know that, like your study plan, this is another of those things that you should be getting email notifications about. And so my name was in the commencement program. Just realized I didn't mention something important. But my name was in the commencement program, so I thought I was good. But unfortunately, there was a button that hadn't been pushed on my non-thesis report, and I almost didn't get my preferred graduation date of 2020 on my diploma because it hadn't been submitted. So make sure to be checking on things. You may need to be proactive and say, hey, can you confirm that you submitted that? I didn't get an email. Um, I do want to go back in time for a moment, because I didn't mention that when you apply to graduate, you can choose your commencement ceremony, and that is separate from when your diploma is actually officially conferred. So if you think you're going to graduate in the summer, you can choose a ceremony of the spring or the fall. Now, it does need to be approved by your major professor. If they feel like, oh, you're not even close to being ready to graduate, they're probably not going to approve your application to graduate. But if they say, yeah, we think you're going to be done in the spring or maybe even the fall, but if, I'm sorry, the summer or the fall, but yes, you can walk in the spring, they approve that plan, then you can choose that. But you might choose fall commencement to walk. The ceremony that you walk in does not have to do with the date of your diploma, uh, but you can't just randomly walk in a ceremony. It needs to be approved, but that's in when you're applying to graduate. I think ceremony selection is one of the choices. Okay. We're moving on. We're almost there. Submitting your thesis or dissertation. We've talked a lot about these dates, and again, this is something that will be talked about on the 24th in Molly's workshop. But the important form is the authorization to submit, which is within the electronic thesis and dissertation program. And this is your final submission of your thesis or dissertation. This, excuse me, this goes back to those dates and deadlines that are very specific for each semester. So again, if you're not quite going to make that deadline and you need to register for Grad 720, this is a good time to do that to be finished up. And again, these resources on the black square have been kind of the same because they're all related to the thesis and dissertation dates and deadlines, and the handbook has a lot more information there. So we're going to have some minutes for any questions or additions from COG staff at the end, but I do want to just one more time introduce or uh, highlight that Jan, Molly, and Brittany, as well as Steph, but there were only three convenient square Steph, sorry. They're all downstairs in Moral Hall 104, and Brittany especially works with study plans and degree audit. Molly works with electronic thesis and dissertation, and Jan works with forms and other grad student support. And so they are the people, if you walk in the office, they'll be happy to support you. Also, Stephanie, who I mentioned, is the assistant to Jerry, the dean, and she has many years of experience here as well and can help. And then upstairs, myself and Michael, we're in Moral 201. We have kind of an exterior door, so you can just open that one and then come see us in one of our two offices. But we're here to help, not as much with the degree steps, but we can certainly get you to the resources you need. If you've got specific questions, we can say, all right, that's a Jan question, that's a Molly question, that's a Brittany question. Or we can help to give you some advice on the thing, especially Michael. I don't do that quite as much, but can give you advice on where you're at in your program because we understand that everyone's journey as a graduate student is going to be different and there's going to be different timelines, different struggles, and that is not unexpected, even if it feels like it for you. So again, here's our contact information, and I would be happy to answer any questions that are still remaining. I'm gonna close the thing here. I'm gonna stop sharing actually. Okay, we are back just to the main room. So are there any unanswered questions? Feel free to unmute, or if we have any left in the chat, or Stephanie, Jan, Michael, if there's any more resources or step information that you'd like to share, that would be great. All right. If we don't have any questions, we are all set. Again, we've got workshops coming up. I'm just going to
Yeah, Amanda.
highlight. Oh,
Amanda.
oh, you have a question? Go ahead, Mohammed.
Yes, my name is Mahmoud. I have a question for you. Since you work with the degree audit and staff, um, uh, just the last week, Jen helped me to submit my academic petition, and up to right now, I the registration office didn't change my class. I called the registration office and I said I already communicated to the Cox. My application was approved and I need to change the class. So still I didn't get any feedback.
Okay. Thank you for that question. I think why don't we, if you can just stick around for another minute or so after we
Yeah,
close
oh
out
yeah,
the meeting,
sure,
then we
sure.
can help with that specific one. Maybe Jan can stay on also. And then Nathan, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the presentation. I was looking in the Canvas, the COG support Canvas, and you said there was a recording of last Monday's um, presentation on the study plan, and I don't see it in here.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. We will get that one posted. We're just a little delayed on that, but the same content was posted from the fall. So if you go to the fall 2024 workshop recordings page, that should have all the grad how-to recordings on it and her slides, I believe. And so yes, but if you check back by the end of this week, I promise we will get we will get the workshops recorded or the recordings posted. that
Okay.
that's
Thank you.
not there. Yeah, thank you. And so yes, we've got on February 24th, we have how to format your thesis or dissertation. And then on March 3rd, we also have how to apply for GPSA Travel, Publishing, and Exhibition Awards, another very useful program, how to get some money, always helpful. So if we have any more general questions, otherwise we will close up, and anyone who has specific questions, feel free to stick around. But thank you so much for attending. And again, these slides will be available. Last semesters are available already in that same spot that I mentioned. But all right, thank you, everyone. And we'll keep it